third down, page Mamches, and the line starts with the word Lora. And the point that we are up to right now is we have already explained that the world, the whole essence and the whole source of the world is in Chitzonius, is in Ha'ora Levat. And because it's in Ha'ora, it is therefore possible for that Ha'ora to extend itself to a point where Chitzonius becomes the only thing that's recognizable. All the way to the point where it can be mislabish in Levushim and completely become contained in Levushim, where that becomes actually klipa. And then, on the other hand, Torah is from Pnimius, is rooted in Pnimius. And therefore, a Pnimius, no matter where it extends itself, it will always remain attached to its source. It can never become, this attachment can become completely slavish and contained and grasped by anything outside. And this is why Torah can come down into the world, and there, which is Chitzonius, and there, while it is there and it has an understanding of the world, it is mevared the world actually, and it shows that this in world within world itself to distinguish, identify Pnimius from Bein Tov Ra.
So Torah in the world is Torah when it's in the world is called Tov, and when it's above the world, Torah when it's in the world is called Tov. When it's Mavar the world, it's Kula Tov. And when it's above the world, it's above Tov and Ra. It's Etzem. Yeah.
I don't know why you want me to paraphrase it that way.
Because it says it's Kula Tov, so
it's Kula Tov. It's all right. Torah is Kula Tov. Doesn't have Tov Ra. Doesn't have Chitzonius. And the reason it doesn't is because it's rooted in Pnimius. Pnimius, as we said, cannot be mislavish in Kelim totally. We have demonstrated this with various illustrations. Even, as we said, even in the world, there is the element in the world that the natural form of the world, natural koiches, how the world functions, is logically as a Chitzonius. There is a whole structure of things, and ultimately, as we pointed out, that ultimately there is the essential truth in the world that it stands on Hashem's will. But the world ultimately stands on Bli Ma. And Bli Ma means on Hashem's will. This is where Hashem wants it. There is not an explanation how the earth is suspended amid nothingness and in the exact place, a spot, on a continual basis. This is the Pnimius Arotz, and this is where the Rebbe wants. And we illustrated this in many ways. I mentioned to you a while ago there was the story where the Rebbe Rashab met with a man called Ayin. His pen name was Achad Ha'am. He was a Yiddishist, and this was a period where there were Apikusis writers, Yiddish, that first came out in the Enlightenment movement and so forth, and he was a distant cousin of the Rebbe. And so they met. I mentioned to you, I think, several times the story. They met, and they had a conference for quite some time. After that, each made a comment about the other. And it's a very interesting thing. The comment that he made about the Rebbe was, Yodeya es ha'olam u'mechaven limred boi. Which means that he knows the world, but he intentionally wants to transform it. In other words, the fact that he knows the world did not in any which way affect his total view and his view of the world. Because Pnimius, Torah, does not get affected by the world. And the Shomi is even higher than Torah. In converse, the Rebbe's comment on him was the exact opposite. And he said that if he should be standing by Kriyas Yamsuf and see the whole phenomenon, the whole occurrence, how Moshe lifts his staff and the Yamsuf splits and the Eden go across and the Egyptians round, and he would observe all of this, he would not be budged, he would still be the same apikoides, which is steeped in chitzonius. The exact opposite. Thank you. Really. All right, so let's continue here. So we said, okay, it's a third from the top of the page. The line begins Lara. Ukmeshi Yizboyer, as will be explained further about this birur that Torah affects in the world. But we mentioned that Torah is mislabish in the world. In order to be mevarer, it has to be mislabish. Mislabish means it has to step into it and get involved with it. But we said that Pnimius cannot be mislabish in the levush. It remains essentially what it is. So we explained, V'eifun yislapshusa beis hadas, in the manner of Torah being mislabish and beis hadas. In fact, Torah, the way we learn Torah, the way Torah is being taught, the Torah is given from the beginning, there is Eitz Hadas, there is a logical process, a presentation, how Torah is understood and learned. And Torah is mislabish to understand and to know, differentiate in every different situation, identify every situation as distinct to another situation. There's an interesting, the Rambam writes in the Hagdama to his preamble to Pirush HaMishnayos. I'm sure you know there is a Pirush HaMishnayos of the Rambam. And in Hagdama Pirush HaMishnayos, the Rambam says that it is clear when one learns Mishnayos that the authors of Mishnayos had Ruach HaKodesh, that their whole learning was on the higher plane. And you see that from the fact that Torah identifies and senses even the smallest difference between two situations. The most minute difference already is reflected in the halacha, in the conclusion of the halacha, which Rambam says, which is impossible, so to speak, humanly impossible, with all the capabilities of human mind. This is Ayin from Kedusha itself. So Torah is mislabish in Eitz Hadas Tevora into the world. However, be'inyan hislapshus beis hadas. I'm sorry, where did I go back? No. I'm sorry. Ve'eifun hislapshus beis hadas. The manner in which the Torah is mislabish and hadas. Einay bebechinas hislapshus utfiso behalvush. This is an extremely important and principal point of this. The manner that Torah is mislabish and hadas is not in his slapshus utfiso behalavushim in the garments of the world. This is one of the paradoxes of learning Torah. On the one hand, it seems to be dealing with exact situations and identifying the levushim, so to speak, the various circumstances. So it should be quite simple to understand the Torah, the reasoning of Torah, and the sense of Torah presents. On the other hand, it is not so simple at all. And it does not surface, it does not come out so directly from the world, the way it is in physical logic. If you have one and one, you have two. It is a direct result of what you put together. Whereas in Torah, it's mislabish. It's mislabish even in the levushim of the world, now it's even in the chitzonis, but it's not nitfas in the levush. Meaning that the hislapshus is only to direct how this should be. Torah remains independent, and it directs how it should be. Not that Torah then identifies and it becomes subservient to the levushim. Now this is at the levushim, the world becomes a decisive factor of how you proceed. V'lochein, and thus, hislapshus zois, this hislapshus, this engaging that Torah is engaged in his adas, ein negia klal be'etzem oir ha'Torah. Is totally unaffected, does not affect in the etzem oil hatoyah. I want to translate these words for a moment. The way things are in the world, particularly if you talk about the levushim, as I pointed out, levushim means the actual tangible elements in the world. There, again going back to one and one, you have one and you have one, and you have two. What do you have two? You have two at the level of the levushim, on the external level. Like I say, two ones. So there is no oil in this. There's only mitzias. The levush. There is two entities. Torah doit mislabish also in the levushim. Mislabish in the levushim does not cover up, does not dim the oil haTorah, which means that in the levushim itself, the Torah views the world from an oil perspective rather than from a mitzias perspective. And there is no effect The etzem oyer HaTorah doesn't touch the etzem oyer HaTorah. It does not change it at all. Like we said this week, we said that this is that the oil, the etzem oil, does not get grasped, does not get absorbed in the levushim, and we demonstrated push it in the world itself, because there is that overall oil in the world. In the world itself, also we have this element. Not an hislapshus, but that which remains not be hislapshus. Like we said, like mentioned just now, Tevet Eretz al Belila. Everything in the world has a certain structure. One thing supports the other, and so forth. And yet, ultimately, there is no logic. It's oir. It's the way Hashem wants it. We also, this is extremely important, which I always point out. Particularly, we point out this is reflected in the human being. The human being, he is a creation in the world, but not in full hislapshus in the world. As we said all the time, that the life element in the human being and the life element in the animal are extremely different. The animal is, the life is only making a living body, which essentially its world, it's a tangible presence, but it has life in it to give it sustenance. The human being is primarily life, but it's mislabish in the goof. And we see this, that the human being is really independent of the levushim. He can function, he can act in a manner that is inexplicable. You cannot possibly explain how that happens physically. He's suspended in mid-air. We discussed it the other day quite extensively. Similarly, Torah. Torah is mislabish in the levushim of the world for the purpose of birur, mevarech, but it does not affect the etzem oil HaTorah. Shaharei, as we know, it says, Divrei Torah eino mekablim tuma. This is halacha. Divrei Torah eino mekablim tuma. Words of Torah do not get contaminated with tuma, which has a halachic implication, and that is, if a person is not toher, he is permitted to learn Torah. How can you learn Torah if you're not toher? The answer is because Divrei Torah eino mekablim tuma. Despite the fact that you understand it and mislavish in your seichel, it remains Torah, a separate entity. With Talmidei Chachamim, and furthermore the Gemara says, Talmidei Chachamim ein oil shel Gehenim sheletes bahem. The fire of Gehenim does not affect them. Because the Torah in them remains, in essence, what it is. This is all in support of the principle that we made way back when, not way back when, it's just a half a page ago, that the whole principle that there is such thing as a change in the slapshus, in levushim and so forth, is only in the ha'ora, not in etzem hoyer. only something that is only reflective of the Oyer Key, but not the Oyer Key itself. Torah is the Etzem Oyer, and therefore it does not become effective. And thus, Be'emes HaTorah Yordo. In truth, the Torah descended, and it got entangled, got involved, in extremely low levels, low elements in the world, completely strange, so to speak, to Elokus. And yet the Torah engages in it. Ukmoya, for example, the Taina Shel Sheker. The Taina Shel Sheker. The Torah deals with false claims. And how do you adjudicate a situation of a dispute? And each one of the disputants makes a different claim. At least one of them is really lying. And you adjudicate between them. Say, look, I don't know, I have to find out who is lying, who is saying the truth. You don't have any witnesses, I can't adjudicate. That's not what Torah says. There are Torah principles, rules, how you deal with this kind of situation. Like, for example, there is a principle called migoy, or minor shaker. The person presents a claim, and the Rav, the person who is adjudicating this case, sees that this person actually could have had an opportunity to make a claim that is more advantageous to him. And that claim had perhaps an even better chance of being accepted. And yet he makes a claim of lesser advantage to himself. So we say, oh, we have a basis to accept, to believe this claim. It's not the end of the story, but we are accepting a claim that may be a lie, on the basis that it could have been a bigger lie. A more advantageous lie. And that way we accept this claim. This is, I'm sure everybody's familiar with this principle. Just want to interject as we were talking about this. The Pasuk says, "B'kerev Elikim Yishput," that when a Beis sits in judgment and they adjudicate any dispute, monetary dispute of a dollar, anything above a pruta, B'kerev Elikim Yishput, the judgment is in the presence of God. It is not just a logical judgment. Let's get it over with. Okay, here he could have said that. Let's accept this claim and let's. It's not the Rav who adjudicates. The Rav has no power to adjudicate anything. The Rav cannot say this is yours and this is yours. The Torah says this is yours, and if the Torah says, it means that the Eibusha says that this is yours. So we are saying logically, I trust him because he could have made a bigger lie. Is that give it a sense of truth, of reality? Well, this is the second. That give us a sense of reality. Where is the godly statement, so to speak? This is what we say. The Torah descends into Tainus Shel Sheker and brings the godly word in there. This is not merely a means of getting out of entanglement. Malul Shakir is a svara in Torah, which brings the koyach of Torah, the koyach Eloki into the world. Essentially, in simple terms, it means this: Hashem created the world, and the world is chitzonius, it's mislapshus in the physical, in the physicality, which conceals essential truth. In other words, you're looking at an object, and there is absolutely no way to correlate the object to anyone's ownership. So it's a mitzvah unto itself. That's what the physical world is. However, within that, as we say all the time, the Rebbe gave the world to the human being. And there is true ownership, a godly phenomenon of ownership that people have. The ownership is not just merely because I grabbed it. The phenomenon of ownership is truly a godly phenomenon. And now we have to adjudicate and say that the godly phenomenon of ownership is, in this situation, is here. That has to bring, so to speak, the element of truth to it. Otherwise, it does not acquire the true principle of ownership. We distinguish all the time. Ownership in Torah does not mean that you by force can protect it. Ownership means that it is a godly statement. This is yours. That's what ownership in the Torah is. Therefore, if we adjudicate on the basis of a migoy, of any svara, it means that it is not, again, it's not merely a convenience. It's actually stating that this is what the Rebbe said, this is yours. This is from the Torah, with its godly spirit, was mislavish in Tainus Shel Sheker, and brings the Elokus into Tainus Shel Sheker. But what does it bring into Tainus Shel Sheker? Elokus. Not it's mislavish in it because I have no way to get out of it, so I do this and I do that. This is the big difference between Torah judgment and between secular judgment.
So this is to say it's not a compromise, but
that's right.
But we could hear by Migui that it's open to abuse.
Yes, it's open to abuse, but the judgment that is produced by Torah is a judgment of truth. Okay, we have to interrupt, and we'll suffer to tomorrow morning. Have a good day.